Renita Young here, host of Your Money Story here on Quick Take. And I hope you're having a fantastic Friday. It's beautiful. We're in New York City, live from the Quick Take studios. And so today it's a very special episode. You know, last week we talked about money mistakes. And today, have you ever dreamed of quitting your 9 to 5 and working fully in your passion, whatever that may be? Maybe over the years, you've gotten a couple of side hustles that you've became really, really great at, or maybe you just desire to do something completely different and not have the traditional 9 to 5 Monday through Friday workday. Well, if that's you, or if you just want to know about it, today is a great day for you because I have coming on the show Jannese Torres-Rodriguez, who is host of the Yo Quiero Dinero Podcast. And so what's important to know about Jannese is that she just quit her job after she became financially independent. We're going to find out some of the side hustles she put together and how she did it all. So let me just invite her to come in right now. Waiting on Jannese. So this is going to be great, guys, especially if you've dreamed of it. Jannese, thank you for
Hi.
joining us.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, Renita.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here with you too. And hey, thanks for the quick shout out on your IG Live a couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely.
And congratulations to you for achieving your financial independence and your dream of quitting your 9 to 5. Like, how does that feel first? How did you feel when you actually did it? I know what led
Uh,
up to it, but how did you feel to
yeah,
actually achieve the number you were looking for?
it's crazy because I feel like I'm still processing it. Like I had to check and double check and be like, is this really happening? Because it's been something I've been working on for so long that now that the time has come, it's I'm still kind of going through the emotions of it. It's really amazing.
It must. And you still have about a week left at work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
so, so hang on there. Maybe we'll check in with you after you leave to see how
Right.
it feels. But I want to start with your money story, how you grew up. Now, money was not talked about as much as I understand growing up in
Yeah.
Jersey as you did. Now you live in Florida, but you grew up in Jersey. And so just tell me, how did you relate to money growing up? What was your relationship with money?
Gosh, and it's funny because I asked this question to all of my guests. So I've had to kind of step back and think about my own journey to even get here. And I think one of the things that sticks out for me as far as my money story is that I always thought like you had to work a 9 to 5 to be successful and
Mm,
that you had to work really hard. Like you had to give up time with your family, you had to give up time with your friends, you had to like just dive into work in order to make a living that was beyond sort of, the paycheck to paycheck living. And I
mm-hmm.
think I got that from my dad because my dad is a consultant. He earned 6 figures, but he spent a lot of his career being away from home and having to travel a lot. So
Mm.
I had this understanding like if I want to earn 6 figures, I'm going to have to sacrifice everything. And I'm going to have to be away from everyone that I love in order to make that happen. And as I kind of progressed through my own career and then started building side hustles, I realized, wait a minute, you don't necessarily have to sacrifice everything to get ahead. You just
Hmm.
have to be more strategic about it.
Important to note that. We're going to come right back to that. I want to know a little bit more about in the household, though. You said something very interesting in a recent live that you did. You and the woman who you were interviewing, and I think she said you have to unpack your money trauma
Mm,
that you learned growing up, and not just in your household, but it's the trauma of your ancestors.
yes.
So, like, how did you begin to unpack your money trauma?
Oh man, I mean, it's a journey, and I will be the first to tell people like we probably should all get therapy because we've got a lot of baggage we got to unpack as humans, right? Like the things that
Yeah.
we see as kids growing up can be really traumatic. So, like, I saw my parents like lose their jobs. I saw
Mm.
like the stress that can have on you. And I was always like this kid where I felt like I always was waiting for something bad to happen. And I took
Um,
that into my adulthood and it made me like very risk averse, which, it's not something that is going to benefit you if you want to start a business. If you're going to be scared of taking
No.
risks, you're actually never going to be able to actually launch. It's not a good mentality to become an investor and start building wealth because there is some risk associated with that.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of unpack like why I had all this fear around money and why I felt like if I got it, it was going to disappear. And it was honestly because I saw how much my parents struggled. And I never wanted to be in that position.
Very important to note that because so many people grow up with money fears. They may not know why they're hoarders growing up. They may not know why they won't buy the insurance on the flight plan, or they always do, whatever. But
Yeah.
we have to unpack this stuff because it impacts our future and it impacts how we make decisions. And it stunts our ability to really show up well for the people we love and for our jobs and for the passions that we have. And
Right.
so, as you know, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And so
Yeah.
you always say on your podcast that, let me make sure I get it right, mindset and mental health, it's the foundation of financial wellness.
Absolutely.
Elaborate on that for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for us to realize that we make decisions based on what's going on in our heads, and your money is going to be subject to whatever you're feeling, right? Because money is just a tool and it manifests itself in the way that you show up in the world. So if you're like very anxious, if you come from, it tends to be an immigrant background or a first gen background where you're like, you saw the struggle growing up, you might be very scared to do things like
Mm,
investing because there's a lot of stigma too in communities of color that like investing is gambling. And so
hmm.
like don't put your money in there, just put it in a savings account. But we know that that's not enough to actually build wealth that's going to allow you to retire with dignity.
Right.
And so, it's about really understanding that your money story, your money traumas, what you have experienced with money is going to form the relationship that you have with it. And if you want to change it, you have to be really proactive about getting to the root of those issues and then taking steps to reshape your relationship with money. So,
Hmm.
doing things like maybe working with a money coach, maybe working with a financial money coach that specializes in mental health because there is an important aspect to it. Um, you know,
Hmm.
Getting in the community of people that are also dealing with these same fears. And I feel like that's kind of
Right.
what the podcast has manifested into. It's this community where we can come together, share the shame, the guilt, the struggles,
Hmm.
and talk about how we're going to get past it together.
Absolutely. And I talk a lot about just in my personal life with my friends and on this show, the shame associated with debt, with even just with budgeting, or get
Right.
this, Jannese, with having money. There is
Yeah.
shame associated when you pay the debt off and you
Yeah.
have money to spend.
Yep.
Maybe we'll get into that later. But hey, the big thing that sounds like you said is just intentionality.
Yeah.
Intentionality is so important. So you were intentional after you worked as an engineer in several different areas for years. You're intentional about uh, this is not necessarily just about having a bunch of money. It's not about the bag, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is about buying time and choices, right? So
Absolutely.
tell us your why for five.
Yeah, so it's funny because I always tell people I was an accidental entrepreneur. Like I never intended to create this thing that now has allowed me to quit my job. So, just a little bit of background. Like my whole impetus for even creating a side hustle was sort of the result of a layoff. So I
Hmm.
saw for the first time as an adult, like, oh, I here I am experiencing the same thing that my parents had to experience. But what can I do differently? Like, what can I do to put something in place so that if this happens, I don't have to be worried about how I'm going to pay the bills.
Hmm.
So I started my food blog, and that was in 2013. And from there, I kind of started to notice that this was something that could become like monetizable, which
Hmm.
I mean, I didn't know anybody who was food blogging. I didn't know anybody who was doing
Back
that.
then, no.
Right.
Not a whole
Yeah.
lot, not for money.
Yeah, absolutely. So it started off as a passion project. It started making money. And then I began to find out about financial independence and the concept of being work optional. And a thing that a lot of people in the fire community talk about is diversifying your income streams and creating passive income so that if you want to take like a trip around the world, you still have money coming in from the things that you've built.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I started to realize like business, fire, if I put these together, this might be my ticket out.
Hmm. Options, man, options. And so then, but before you quit, you made a plan way back in 2018 for
Yeah.
when you quit. And so walk us through some of the things people should do before they quit.
Oh
So
yeah. I mean,
hold your excitement. People, what this is what you should do before you quit.
yes. And so I will be the first to tell you I am very risk averse. So it took me a very long time to feel like I was in a place financially that I could make the leap. So I'm
Hmm.
never going to be one to tell people like, yeah, just go quit your job, follow your dreams, and you'll figure it out. Like
Right.
that's just bad advice. Okay. Um, what I did was a couple of kind of extreme things. So I owned a home in New Jersey. I decided that I was going to move to a lower cost of living area because I just felt like even though my husband and I were earning good money, it still felt like we were just like on the hamster wheel and we
Mm.
couldn't get ahead. And a big part of that was because I still had student loans at the time, and just the cost of living in New Jersey is like so much more expensive.
It is.
So I decided I wanted to move to Florida. So I orchestrated for my husband and I to both transfer with our companies out here, get our relocation paid, and start living in an area where it was going to cost us less, but we were able to keep our salaries. Northeast salaries go way farther here in the state of
Yes,
Florida,
I'm
just
sure.
because there's no state income tax and cost of living is lower. So
Yeah.
that's one big thing that we did. Then it was a matter of really getting intentional about getting rid of my student loan debt. I knew that those payments were going to stop me from being able to accelerate my journey to fire by being able to invest and
Hmm.
just like having more disposable income to build wealth versus just paying back debt. So I got really intentional about using my side hustle income instead of just throwing it away on like random things or going on excessive vacations. I
Hmm.
started throwing like 4 to 5 times more than the minimum payment at my student loans. So I was able to pay them off in about 17 months versus 5 years, which was the original timeline for me to pay them off.
Very good.
And yeah, and so once I was student loan debt free, we made that move. Our cost of living went way down, and I started really just honing in on the investment, putting a ton of money into my savings account. So I decided to save 1 year's worth of expenses, and then
Hmm.
any extra I would put in the market. So I started maxing out my 401k, my IRA, my HSA. I opened another 401k as a business owner. So
Hmm.
I started getting really, really serious about just bulking up my cash positions so that when the time came, I'm ready to go.
Very good. And you did that way ahead of time. And you started building up your emergency fund. Some people call it another kind of fund that I'm not going to say here. It's a fund. It's
Yeah,
a fund.
the
But
flyaway fund.
the flyaway fund, that's a good way to put it. All right. So take me through some of the side gigs you had. So the one was Delish Delights,
Yeah.
your blog, but what were some of the others?
Yeah. So as I created the podcast, this was around mid 2019, and I didn't really know what I was doing again. It's like, whenever I've started a business, it's always been from a place of passion, and then all of a sudden, like people start offering me money to do things. And I
Hmm.
think that speaks to the importance of not focusing solely on the money as the reason why you want to start a side hustle. Because
And
I can,
on the no, go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead.
I agree. I was going to say in the talent, like people don't understand some of these things that they do every day. That's a monetizable
Yes.
talent. You know what I mean? Go ahead. Sorry.
We do. No, we have so many talents that people would be willing to pay for if we just had the courage to show up, right?
Mm,
That's like one of the biggest things. But and I realized very quickly that like money is not enough because I was making six figures in my career and I still wasn't happy because I felt like it just wasn't what I was meant to do. So the
mm,
podcast came out of, this desire to talk more about money, to share my experience, and to tell people, like, look, I'm building side hustles, y'all. I want to teach you how to do this because I feel like this might be something that more of us should be doing
yes.
because we don't know, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then the pandemic came, and that definitely accelerated the messaging of the podcast, the followership. People
Mm-hmm.
started really resonating with this idea that, like, maybe these 9 to 5s that like everybody swears is the most comfortable, stable situation,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not. Maybe we need to be a little
Yeah.
more proactive about creating these, businesses for ourselves. So that way we're not subject to the mercy of like external forces as much, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Totally
Yeah.
understand. 100%. And so when you talk about side hustles and how to create one, how to find one, I think we really just talked about that a little bit, looking at your interest, talents. Are there any other quick ways you would suggest people to how to find side hustles?
Yeah. I think, definitely think about the things that people ask you about often. So the reason how
Okay.
I knew I was gonna start a money podcast is because I kept getting money questions from all my friends. We kept having conversations about investing and building wealth and like, what should we be doing with our money?
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of just having those conversations in a small group, I'm like, maybe there's more people who want to know about this. And that's kind of where I started with the podcast. And then, as a result of the podcast, so many different opportunities have come up, especially as I've continued to like hone my messaging and just to really make people understand like, what I'm trying to do here. So
Mm-hmm.
I started doing speaking engagements. I'm starting to do workshops, sponsored content for companies. I mean, freelance writing, it's crazy the amount of things that like you can manifest once you just start really knowing like why you're doing this. Get
Mm.
really clear on who you're serving because that's what a business is. You're helping someone figure out a problem,
Yeah.
and there's value in that. People will pay for you to help them.
That's true. I mean, I have a mentor who always tells me, like, listen, as long as you're in service to people, you're always going to be successful. Be
Yes.
kind, offer to help, like, be in service to people. And
Hmm.
so, on that note of being in service to people and investing, you did not hold back on investing in yourself when it came to this, so that you could be able to then be in service to people. And so just talk about the importance of that, investing in yourself during this time. If someone is going to turn a side hustle into their main hustle,
Yeah.
how important is it to invest in yourself? And what are some ways that you invested in yourself?
Yeah. I love this question. So the best thing I can tell you is at some point you are going to reach a capacity and you won't be able to do more because we're humans. We have set number of hours in the day and a set amount of capabilities. So at
Mm-hmm.
some point, you're going to have to either invest in processes, you might have to invest in people, you might have to invest in education. Something is going to have to change for you to be able to scale your business.
Mm.
So when I realized that I could not accept any more opportunities without getting some help, I had to hire help. So I was able to hire someone to help me with my social media planning. And like that took off 20 hours of planning a week at least.
That's
So
good.
with those 20 hours back, like I
Time is
can start
money.
right. Like I have time now to like create new opportunities for myself, to
Good.
network, to build new products. But if I'm like just bogged down all day worrying about social media, I would never be able to get to that point. Then,
Mm-hmm.
the thing is too, I think a lot of us kind of get stuck in this idea that we have to be experts at everything. And
Mm.
trust me, you don't. Okay. I will never tell you to like start doing your own accounting for your business, to start handling legal matters. Like, no, there are professionals in the world. You can hire a CPA for not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
money. Hiring legal help by the hour, it's okay. Like, we can make these investments because we know that there's just some things we're not going to be good at, and that's okay. And
That's
then
okay.
systems systems are so important. So like
Yeah.
whether it is, using something like Calendly to get people to book time with you versus having to go back and forth with email and wasting time like
Mm.
that, or, using a social media scheduler so that you don't always have to log in and you can bulk schedule your content. I mean, there's so many different like low cost and free platforms that you can use to save some time because that's the whole point. We want to make sure that we're using our time to make money because if you
Mm-hmm.
want to walk away from your job, you need to be able to be making a substantial amount of income.
Absolutely. And so for the things that only you can do, like how do you manage setting these goals and then keeping yourself accountable to them?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's the hardest part, right? Like we have all these dreams and aspirations, and sometimes they can just feel like so overwhelming. One thing that I have done is I trick myself into putting it out there. So I will tell folks like when I'm going to launch a new product. So then it's like, okay, wait,
I gotta
now
do it.
because now everybody's waiting for me,
That's
right?
good.
If you just start writing it down and like nobody knows about it, you might just be like, ah,
Yeah.
you know, it's the same sort of concept as like finding a workout buddy, right? Like you're much more likely to go to the
Right.
gym if you have
Uh-huh.
somebody that's holding you accountable. So
Exactly.
you
Or
have
like
to do the same
they
thing.
need me. They need me.
Yes,
So I'm gonna do
exactly.
it. Hey,
Right.
but self-care and money planning and budgeting and doing self-care is important. And you need yourself.
Yes.
So when we can make that shift, that'll be great.
Right.
I'll say hello to the perfectionists out there on it. But okay, so let's switch gears just a little bit. Like when we talk about all these different side hustles, you've had quite a few at one time before.
Yeah.
It's important to manage your time well when you do this. And so you've talked about outsourcing.
Yeah.
What don't people understand about time management?
Mm. Well, I think outsourcing is one of those things that people get like stressed out about because they feel like it's going to cost them a lot of money. And so
Hmm.
that's one thing. Like you have to be comfortable just offloading some things. And there are really low cost marketplaces like Fiverr or Upwork that you can start to source talent there to help you with like the low hanging fruit, whether that's responding to
That's
emails
good.
or creating content,
Hmm.
etc. Like that's a great way to manage your time because you can outsource some things and just get some time back there. Now, there's always the question of like, well, I don't have enough time to do this. I am married, I have kids, I'm going to school, I work full time. I feel like we have to get really like defensive of our calendar,
Mm.
right? We have
That's
to kind of,
good. That's good. Block out
we,
this time. I'm not doing this right
yes,
here. That's
that's
good.
it. And I think especially for women, like we are always the ones who are picking up the load for everybody. We tend to do more
Mm.
of the housework. We tend to do more of the family management work, raising the
Hmm.
children. And it's like if you're working and you're trying to build a business, you're gonna have to at some point tell your family, look, maybe I'm not gonna be able to cook dinner for you like 5 days a week.
Hmm.
Or maybe everybody's gonna have to figure out how to do their own laundry because
Figure it
mommy
out.
needs an hour a day to be able to work on her stuff, right?
Hmm.
And so we got to take the guilt away from demanding a little bit of our time back. We
Yeah,
have to put it on a calendar the same way that you would honor a meeting with someone else. You have to honor that time with yourself. That's the only
exactly.
way this is actually going to happen.
Exactly. Kind of like, honor your time with yourself, honor the goals that you have by actually
Absolutely.
doing them and making sure you
Yes.
have enough time to do them. And
Mhm.
so I want to shift gears again into the concept of generational wealth in the Latinx community. And communities of color. You talk about this all the time. And so when I think about this, I think about how many communities of color have intergenerational homes, multi-generational homes. That is a way, in a sense, of building wealth because before, you stay in the home with two different generations until you can afford to buy your own home. But what are
Right.
some other practical ways you have been building generational wealth in your family or you intend to?
Yeah. Love this question. So, I think once you become proficient with your finances, it is so important to share that knowledge. I think that is number one. And
Okay.
so, and that's priceless. I mean, I think
Yeah.
sharing education is life changing. And I've seen it because I actually have been talking about money now with my parents. And both of my parents this year at the age of 60 have opened investing accounts, which I'm just like
Wow. At 60?
mind blown. Yes, at 60.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
never too late, right? It is never too late. And I think that's one thing we have to remain focused on is like, if you're learning about something and you know how important it can be and how helpful that information is, like share it. Share it with your friends, your family.
Hmm.
Another thing too is, you know, I know how much student loans affected me and how I would love to be able to prevent that for the next generation. So I decided to open a 529 college savings plan for my niece because
Okay.
I'm like, you know what? If there's something I can do for her to have a leg up in this world and to
Mm,
start, on the right foot, that that's priceless, right? That's
it
life
is.
changing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, making sure that I have an estate plan in place because if
Mm,
I'm building wealth, I want to make sure it's going to the people that I want it to go to when I'm
yeah.
not here anymore, right? there's a lot of people that miss that part, or they don't want to have that conversation because it's so taboo to talk about like aging and death.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but it's gonna happen to all of us, y'all. So like, why don't we
It is.
plan for this? So that way, we don't have to worry about it, and our families can
Yeah.
rest assured that like you've got everything in place, you've taken care of what needs to be taken care of, and you can go back to enjoying life and
Yep.
remember what it's all about.
Exactly. And so I found it so fascinating when you spoke with Anna Njai Conte, who I interviewed her at the Bloomberg Wealth Summit a few weeks ago, but it blew my mind that she told you to create an emergency fund for your parents. Like that was
Yes.
revolutionary. I might want to do that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
tell me something. How do you go about creating it, and how do you determine how much money you need to put in that
Yeah.
emergency fund?
Yes, absolutely. So that the concept of the family emergency fund is something that, Anna introduced me to as well, and I've written about it. And it has been honestly transformational because I feel like a lot of us want to be able to be in a place where we can freely give money to our families without sacrificing our own financial goals. And
Mm-hmm.
so for the longest time, like my emergency fund wasn't just for me, it was like for anybody, that I love, that I want to help. But
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like there was probably a better way to do this. So instead of just pulling money from the one pot of an emergency fund, I decided to split them up. I have my own personal emergency fund that has a year worth of expenses because I'm self-employed now, so I have to make sure I have that cushion.
Mm-hmm.
But then I created a separate savings account for my family. And I don't have a specific target of money to put in there per se, but I always want to make sure there's at least like $2,000 in there minimum, just because, that could cover something like a car insurance deductible or
Mm-hmm.
some medical insurance deductible or some uncovered, prescription costs or something like that. Like that's kind of the base that I want to have in there. And then as I am able to, I will put more money in there because, you want to be able to understand what kind of